My name is Steve Power. I'm a consultant, a solutions consultant here at Pegasus Software. So apologies for being late, and thanks for coming along to this particular session. What I've put together as an agenda for this is I want to take you through a new product that we've just released for Opera 3 SQL Server Edition, and that product is called Pegasus Accounts Payable Automation, and we abbreviate that Accounts Payable Automation just to AP Automation. And the whole point of about AP automation, it really is a sort of springboard to a host of new features that we've introduced into the software that will improve and automate the way that the purchasing team interacts with their suppliers. That's where it's estimated that in the UK, it's estimated that 85% of inbound business to business purchase invoices are sent via email. And that email has an attachment, and the attachment is the actual purchase invoice. So what we've looked at here is using technology to help automate the handling of those invoices. By doing that, it dramatically improves the efficiencies within the finance team within a business. So in this session, what I'm intended to go through with you is to introduce you to and to explain what AP automation is all about. So how does it work? What does it deliver, and how you would look at implementing such a system, but more importantly, the benefits that that system will bring to you. Accounts payable automation, AP automation, is a suite of tools that is written to extend the functionality of the purchasing side within Opera 3 SQL Server Edition. Accounts automation is a system by which your accounts payable processes are handled digitally using technology rather than the way that you currently do it, which is very much a manual type process. So it should revolutionize the way that your business will process and pay your supplier invoices. It's a web-based service which integrates both the latest of the OCR technologies and artificial intelligence with the accounting functions provided within Opera 3 SE. So let me describe what AP automation is all about. In this first slide, and I hope you can see this slide, in this first slide, what I've tried to describe is how the standard Opera 3 system handles the receipt of a purchase invoice when it comes in from a supplier. And hopefully you'll all recognize this type of data flow. In the existing purchase invoice process, you'll have received some sort of service or some sort of product from a supplier, and they're going to invoice you for that. In most cases, you'll receive an email which will have an attachment that contains that purchase invoice. And I guess what you're going to do there is you're going to receive this invoice via the email. And I guess what you would do is you'd open up the email, you'd open up the attachment, you might even print that attachment, but that's all a manual process. And I guess then what you'd do is you'd manually look at the invoice to make sure that it's correct. So open up the invoice, have a look at the invoice. You might even share that invoice as well with other people, because it might be part of a sort of approval workflow where, yeah, I've got this invoice, but I'm going to send it to one of my colleagues to have a look at this invoice to make sure it's correct. So we have this sort of manual workflow where you'll approve that invoice. Let's assume that you've said the invoice is absolutely fine and you agree with it. Then that invoice would get manually entered into the purchase ledger within your Opera 3 system. And again, all of that is a manual sort of process. Once you've approved the invoice and you've entered it into the purchase ledger within Opera 3 SE, then that's more of an automated process, because what Opera 3 SE will do is it will see the purchase ledgers arrive. What it will allow you to do is it will then update the accounting system. So it'll go to the supplier account, it'll update this supplier account. It will automatically post information into the nominal ledger. So it'll automatically update the VAT account, and it'll update the balance sheet and all that sort of stuff. So that's an automated process once you enter it into the purchase ledger. So the Opera 3 element of it is automated. When you get to the payment process, however, that is a semi-automated type process. And what I mean by that is you need to decide which invoices are going to be paid. You could base that on the due date, which is fine. But some of the suppliers may take preference over other suppliers because they might be more important to your business. So in which case you're going to put a sort of preference to pay those, or it could be a combination of both the due date and who the supplier is. So that's a manual type process. But after that, your Opera 3 system will process that automatically. It will go through and it will generate the BACS payment file. It will print out the remittance advices and email them to the suppliers, and it will update the supplier account and the nominal accounts and all of that. So that's a semi-automated process. But due to the lack of automation, this entire workflow is more complex and time consuming, as additional processes are required to be performed to check. And those checks are mainly to make sure that you're preventing errors in this sort of payment process. Okay, so that's what the current system is. What is AP automation designed to do? For every piece of information that comes into your organization, before it can be of value, you need to have a look at that information. You need to understand what kind of information it is, decide what to do with it, and then direct it to the appropriate systems with all business process. The length of time taken for that can be significant because it involves a lot of effort, and that effort is to avoid mistakes going into the system. After implementing an AP automation system, you'll find the workflow simpler, with most of the processes automated or semi-automated with less wait times. And as you can see on this slide, we're all about automating the process of purchase invoices coming through from the system. So let me explain. As before, you're going to get an email. That email will have an attachment, and that attachment will be the purchase invoice. Instead of you having to manually open that email, open up that attachment, what you'll find is that the AP automation system from Pegasus will do that automatically. It will scan the email box for your purchase invoices. It will detect the arrival of a new purchase invoice. It will open up that invoice and it will scan that email to identify who the supplier is. It will look at the invoice attachment, and that will be scanned by our OCR and our AI systems, i.e. our optical character recognition system will extract out the data, and our artificial intelligence systems will analyze the data in that attachment. And what they're trying to do here is extract out the invoice header and the line item data to validate those details on the purchase invoice. It can handle most types of documents. So you might receive PDFs, you might receive Word, Excel spreadsheets, text files, HTML files, scanned images and what have you. So for most types of documents, when it does that scanning and that validation, that is automated. So you can see those first two processes there are automated within the system itself. If you have an authorization workflow, details of the purchase invoice will be emailed to those people that are on that workflow. So if you're saying, yeah, these people have got to look at it and authorize it, well, that's automated as well, because it knows who on your workflow needs to look at the purchase invoice to approve it. Once it's gone through that approval process and you said, yeah, this invoice is valid and what have you, you say, right, I'm approved it. It will then automatically post it into the purchase ledger. So there's no manual entry of this. Once you approve a purchase invoice, it will end up in the Opera 3 SQL SE purchase ledger. And once it's in the purchase ledger, it will update the supplier account and it'll update the nominal ledger and all of that sort of stuff. All of this activity is automated. Only specific intervention points are required, normally within the approval workflow, where you look at the invoice and you physically say, yeah, I'm happy with this invoice. That's the only bit that really needs the manual intervention. So as you can see from this flow diagram, it's a highly automated process designed to optimize the whole of this procedure. And that's exactly what AP automation is all about. Okay, well, how do we achieve that? Okay, let's see how it actually works. Let me run through the Pegasus AP automation system so you understand what it's all about. To launch the system, you will go through and it will ask you for your username and your password to log onto your company's account within the system itself. And when you log in, you'll see this sort of screen here. Okay, this screen will vary. It depends on what your security profile is, and it depends on the features you've allocated to an individual user, but this gives you the access to the system. In my scenario here, I've set myself up as a day-to-day processor of purchase invoices within the system, so I've given myself access to that. I've also given myself supervisor rights as well. So under this sort of configuration option, this gives me supervisory rights, and the reason I've done that is so that I can demonstrate it to you. What are the options we have on my screen here? The first one I've got is to manage orders. This allows me to go through and import purchase orders from the Opera SE system and therefore allow me to automatically allocate the purchase invoices against the purchase orders. However, the purchase orders is not in the initial release. That is in a phase 2 release. So all we're talking about here at the moment is not managing purchase orders, but just managing the purchase invoices. Okay, so I can manage the invoices, and I'll look at that in a moment. We can look at reports, invoice packs. We also have this supplier management option, and this allows us to add attributes to the imported suppliers coming in from Opera 3 SE that might not automatically get assigned. So we can control what bits of information are going from Opera 3 SE into the AP automation system. And we've got this configuration option that allows me as a supervisor to set up bits of the system. So let me first of all take this configuration option. Okay, what can I do here? Manage users. This allows us to set up the users on the system within your organization who have access to this system itself. Manage the workflows. This allows us to set up the authorization workflow by which different people in your organization can get involved with signing off a particular purchase invoice. Manage events. This allows you to define what happens if something occurs. So for instance, if a purchase invoice is fully approved, what do you want to happen? Do you want to send an email to the owner of that transaction to say it's been approved? Or do you just want to automatically post the invoice directly into the purchase ledger within Opera SE? And so on. There's a whole range of events you can automate. Manage company. This allows you to set up things such as the email account that is being monitored for this particular company so that it can bring in the inbound purchase invoices for that company. It also allows you to go through and do things such as validate bank account details on the system itself. So if you've got a purchase invoice that has a bank account, the supplier has a bank account, are they the same bank account? And it will also allow you to go through and do various other things there as well. Reference data, that allows you to say what parts of the Opera 3 SE system populate the AP automation. So you might want the VAT codes, you might be using departments and currencies, in which case you can set it up to say, yeah, bring all that sort of information in. Manage custom fields. If you've got any bespoke in your Opera 3 system, well, then we can bring that across, those bespoke fields across into the AP automation system. And the final option I've got here is to manage notifications. This allows you to decide what notifications you want to send out. So for instance, if I go through, I could set the system up to send a nudge email to an approver to encourage them. So each time a person needs in the workflow needs to go through and approve something, I can send them an email to say, Steve, there's an invoice awaiting your approval. Or do we want to send it as a daily report? At the end of the day, we could send out an approver daily report. Here's a list of all the invoices that you need to approve. Or maybe when a new purchase invoice arrives, do I want to tell somebody, hey, there's a new purchase invoice arrived, and what have you. So there's lots of different ways that we can go through and we can set up these notifications. Let's have a look at these workflows because these are a key part of the system to approve an invoice. So remember what a workflow is. A workflow allows us to set up an authorization workflow by which different people in your organization can be involved with signing off a purchase invoice. Here we can see I've got a couple of different types of workflow. One which I've called finance and another one I've called department heads. Let's have a look at the department head workflow. So I'm going to go into this one. And here we can see there are a couple of positions in this particular workflow. So I've got position 1 and I might have an individual or a department or a group of people. And here I've got a position 2. So my position 1 are 2 departments. My position 2 is an individual. This is just a sort of example of what we can do here. Notice as well, I've got this transaction type. What is this workflow looking to achieve? It could, if I have the purchase order system activated, it could look for purchase orders. If in my instance, I don't have that, but what I want to do is I want to look at invoice and credit notes, well, then I'm turning on those, or I could turn it on to look at all transaction types. But in my example, I'm dealing with invoices and credit notes. Okay, that's great. Position 1, what have we got at position 1? Well, you notice I've got 2 departments at position 1 in this approval workflow. I've got the sales and marketing department and I've got the IT department. And also I've got this second position here, and the second position is a person. It's the chief executive officer is the person at the second position. Okay, let's have a look at position 1, the sales and marketing team. So I'm going to go and have a look at this part of the workflow. Here I can say in the sales and marketing team, I've got a person called Claire Smith. If I want to add more than one person, I can add as many people as I want, or I could even add a group of people or a department. But in my example here, I've just got Claire Smith as the person that's approving on behalf of the sales and the marketing department. Okay, let's have a look at this configuration criteria. Okay, so I've got Claire Smith. And what are the conditions for Claire Smith? If all of these conditions are met, and I can change that into different things. And what's the condition? Well, it's either the sales department or it's the marketing department. Okay, that's absolutely fine. Claire is a member of those. Notice also it has another question up here. The approver has no personal threshold. And what I mean by that is when I set Claire Smith up in the system, I could have given her a personal threshold of, say, £500. And what that would mean is that Claire can approve any invoice up to the value of £500. But I didn't say that. In which case, for this particular workflow, it therefore says, OK, include this approval step if the net value is at least. And if I put £250 in there, it says if the value of this invoice is at least £250 and above, then Claire has to approve it. So in which case you can start to see how I can start to build up that sort of analysis. I might want to add other conditions. So it's not just these conditions here. I might want to add other conditions. Like what? Well, I can choose lots of different things. I could choose the transaction type. If the transaction type is an invoice, I want you to do that. But if it's a credit note, I want these other conditions to apply. I might want it to be related to a specific supplier. If it's this supplier, you do this. If it's those other suppliers, you do that. Or I might even want to take it down to a particular product. If on this purchase invoice that's come in, it's this product, then I want these rules to apply. But if it's that product, then I want those rules to apply. In my case, however, what I'm going to select is I'm going to select the currency code. And what I'm going to say is the condition has to be the currency code is equal to what? US dollar, euro, Australian dollar? No, I'm going to say British pound. So my criteria now is that Claire Smith, she's got to be in the sales department, the sales and marketing department, and the currency of the invoice must be sterling. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. You'll see why in a moment. I've selected that, but I'm going to say yes. It's going to be this particular value here, and I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to OK that. So in which case I've now set Claire up that she's got to be in the sales and marketing team, and the value of the transaction is it's got to be in sterling. OK. Wonder why I chose sterling. Well, have a look here. Claire can approve it under those conditions, and then it goes to the CEO. And the CEO has the ability to approve any transaction that's £1,000 or above. So if the purchase invoice was sterling and it was under £1,000, then Claire can approve it. But if it's not sterling and it's above £1,000, then it must go to this second person. It must go to the CEO. So if it's above £1,000, that's absolutely fine. But why would I choose the currency of sterling? What I could say is for the CEO, maybe I add in therefore, or the currency is not sterling. And what I'm saying there is nobody else can approve any foreign currency transaction other than the CEO. So you can start to see this can be quite flexible. Now, in my example, that's a fairly simple example. It's a value and it's a currency, but you can see there's an awful lot of control over the workflow and therefore in the power of controlling the approval of purchase invoices. Okay, let me go back to the main screen. And that's just an example of a workflow, but I can set up thousands of them. Okay, on the main screen, what does it show me? So when you log in, you'll get a screen similar to this. The first thing you've got here is what is the email account that's been monitoring? So in which case, each customer gets a unique email address. And now we assign those email addresses. However, if you have your own specific email account, then we can monitor that address as well. In a multi-company setup, each individual company will have its own email account. Notice we have something at the top right here called invoice credits. These are the number of invoice credits. Mine's set to 99 there, so these are the number of invoice credits that are available to you. An invoice credit is consumed each time you process a purchase invoice through the system. They're bought in packs of 1,000 and they can be shared across all entities. And what I mean by that is if you've got a multi-company system, you don't buy them for individual companies, you just buy them for your group of companies and then they're shared across all of those. I've got this sort of burger bun option up here. Now, if I select that, then instead of looking at these tiles, I might want to look at it as this list of options are available to me. So you can make it look different to the way you want, depending on how you want to look at these options. Notice I've got companies. So here I've got two companies. I've got a company called Pegasus Midlands, and I've got another company which is called Pegasus Software. So it allows you to set up multi-companies. And if I'm allowed to hop into different companies, then I can choose which company I go into. In my case, I'm going to go into this Pegasus Software company, and I've been given access to my profile. So this is where I can set myself up or other people that have this sort of authority can do. So here we go. I've got Steve Power. My language is English and what have you. And this is my role within the organization. Notice I have this option for nominees. And what this is all about is if I'm going away on holiday, then what I can do is I can nominate somebody else to approve on my behalf. So while I'm away, instead of sending a nudge email to me to say, Steve, you've got an invoice, it will send it to whoever I nominate. Now, I can set that up because I've got the security to do that. However, if I didn't have the security to do that, then another supervisor role can do that for me. Okay, let's go back to the home screen and let's have a look at it from an invoicing perspective. So I'm going to select this option here to manage invoices. Okay, so let's go into that option. And here we've got a number of trays that are sitting here, unprocessed, submitted, and what have you. Here's the unprocessed transaction, and I can see there are 5 invoices that are sitting in this tray for unprocessed. Now, remember, the system is monitoring the inbound emails, and it's looking at those, and from those, it'll extract out the invoices. And what it's going to do is when it extracts out an invoice, it's going to drop them into one of these trays here. Unprocessed one, as we can see here, so there's 5 invoices there. I've got another one, which is grouped together under submitted, awaiting approval, approved, denied, or deleted. Okay, that's fine. When they arrive, they might arrive in this unprocessed box. And now the unprocessed box, this unprocessed column here is for any invoice that the system can't automatically deal with. So if it's not able to follow the automated route, what you'll find is that it will drop it into this unprocessed tray, waiting for a user to intervene to have a look at it. What's the problem with it? Is the coding wrong on there, or are the other issues on there? In which case a user would need to go through and fix that. Now, initially, when you set up the system, all purchase invoices will fall into this unprocessed tray. However, as you process invoices through the system, the AI, the artificial intelligence, will learn about the style of invoice sent in from a supplier. Essentially what it does do, it builds up a supplier template for each supplier where it stores details of the invoice. Now, these sort of details can be things like the invoice date, for instance. Is the date an alphanumeric? In other words, is it saying something like the 21st of September 2023, where September's spelt out in full, or is it from a supplier where it just says 21/09/23? It starts to learn that type of thing from the supplier. And it will also look at the supplier and say, well, this supplier normally posts to this nominal ledger account. It will look for the payment terms. Are the payment terms coming from the supplier record, or do the payment terms come from the invoice? And what it's doing is it's building up that template. This can become very sophisticated because the whole point of AP automation is to handle every invoice from a supplier automatically. And the aim is to drop every invoice that arrives into this awaiting approval tray. So in other words, all the analysis and all the values and all the other stuff are automatically extracted, evaluated to make sure they're correct, and then it just dumps it in awaiting approval. However, there may be occasions where something goes wrong and the AI system says, I don't understand this invoice, in which case I need to go through and ask someone to manually intervene with that. Okay, so once that manual intervention has been dealt with, then it will move the invoice into both the submitted and the waiting approval, and I'll show you that in a moment. If it's waiting approval, you can approve it, and then when you've approved it, it will drop into this approved tray. Or if you don't accept it, then it can drop into this denied tray. No, we're not accepting this particular invoice that's on there. Notice as well what it has is we're on the unprocessed tray, and we can see things such as who the supplier is. We can see the supplier reference number. We can see the netback gross that's on there. We also allocate a unique tracking number, so we call it an invoice number here, but you can name it to whatever you like. But we have this unique number that rolls up for every transaction that's going through, and we also have the date that it was received, the invoice date, and the payment date that's on there. Sorry, I've got a box that's on here that's going to interfere. Sorry, there's a box in the corner of my screen that I'm. Right. Notice at the end of these columns here, I've got two items on there that are marked in red with a D. What's that all about? Well, if I hover across one of those, it says this transaction is potentially a duplicate. So what it's trying to do here is looking at invoices that come in, and it sees whether it's a duplicate. What's the supplier? Well, I've got two here. They're the same supplier name. They're the same supplier invoice number. They're the same net VAT gross. They have the same date. They have the same payment date. Are they a duplicate? If it is a duplicate, then what we would do is we delete one of them, and it will transfer it from this unprocessed tray into the deleted column. So in other words, it's checking for duplicate invoices coming through to you. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. If I drill down into an invoice, so let's drill down into this Riga's properties invoice. What it's done here is, as you drill down into the invoice, it has gone through and it's created its own version, its own internal representation of that invoice. So we've got the header information that's appearing up here. We can see various details there, and it's also got the line information that's shown below. In the header information, what it's showing, well, this invoice number has been assigned by our system because that's the incremental number. Our system has automatically assigned which company does it belong to. So this belongs to the Pegasus Midlands company. And for a supplier, you can define one of these layouts. So we've got multiple versions of these layouts depending upon the type of layout of the invoice, and in which case you can assign them through to a particular software itself. The company name, well, that's coming through from a mixture of our capture software and what's stored within Opera 3 SE. So it's trying to link that back to the correct customer that's on there. It's extracted out the netback gross information that's on there, and it's got supporting information such as the invoice date, the currency, the invoice number, and so on. So it's extracted all of that information that's on there. It is giving me some warning messages though. It's saying here's there's no purchase order reference that's on there. So it's giving me a warning. It's giving me a warning message about that. Now I know that will be the case because I don't actually have the purchase order module activated. If I did, then what it will try to do is match the purchase order to the purchase invoice that's on there. It's also given me a warning message about the bank account details. So that's highlighted in red, and there's some issue with the bank account details. So we can have a look at that. The feature associated with that is that we can import in the bank account sort an account code from Opera 3 SE. And if there is a bank account details on the invoice, we can match the two together. We can tell you whether they match, or we can tell you whether they don't match. And in this case, it's saying there might be a problem because they don't match there. And the reason for that is people send in a fraudulent invoice. It looks like a real invoice, but what they do is they change the bank account and they change the sort code. This will stop that sort of fraud because it allows you to go through and pick it up. However, if the bank account details are incorrect, it could simply be that the supplier has moved from Lloyds Bank to, I don't know, Barclays Bank. In which case, if you give the supplier a call, have you changed your bank account? Yeah, we have, Steve. In which case, you update your Opera 3 SE system and then those error messages will disappear. Okay, we can see the lines. And here we've got the details of the line. Notice it's giving me a warning in red here. A department code is required. And what that's saying is it couldn't automatically assign the department code for some reason. That's probably why the reason this particular invoice is sitting in that unprocessed tray. And if I hover across any of these things, it gives you a message to say, why is it in red? Well, it's in red because you need to do this. Okay, let's hide that message. Okay, so we've got a few other options that are available to us. I've got this show invoice. If I click that, that is the actual scanned invoice that was on the email. So when they sent the email in that had the attachment, that is the actual image that was in that particular attachment. And what we can see here, it looks different to my layout here, but if we look at all the figures, all those figures are exactly the same figures that it's extracted into our system. Notice as well, this is a PDF. So we can see there's the PDF that's on that. Now, what we'd encourage you, if your suppliers are sending in PDF images to you for their purchase invoices, we'd ask you to talk to them to say, can you include that as a smart PDF? And what we mean by a smart PDF is each of the individual characters in a smart PDF are unique. So in which case, when our AI software looks at it, it knows, for instance, is a zero, or is it the letter O? It knows, for instance, is an I, or is it number one? Because it can look at the individual characters and it can evaluate what those characters are. So if you go through and you've got suppliers sending in PDFs, ask them to make them smart PDFs and it will just make it so much quicker and more accurate for us when we do the looking at those invoices. But that's just a PDF. It can be all sorts of other documents. It can be Word documents. It can be Excel spreadsheets and all sorts of different things, because our OCR software is designed to pick up all sorts of different types. Okay, so let me hide that invoice. Okay, but it's useful to have that inbound invoice so you can see there. But ultimately, for this invoice to come from the unprocessed tray, I've got to correct it. So I can go into things like, I can click this lightning button here, and it gives me various options that are available to me. So I can fill in things like the missing account, I can fill in the VAT code, but in my case, what I actually want to do is I want to go through and I want to fill in the missing department. I can't see this. Bear with me. Let me just drop out of my PowerPoint because I've got this Teams thing that's sitting there. No, I can't move it. No, okay. It's just something that doesn't allow me to get to various parts of this slideshow. But anyway, let's carry on. Okay, but what I'm going to do here is I can fill in these missing bits of information. So I could go through and I could potentially fill in that department code. Or what I could do is I could take this edit option here. And this is just a different way that I can look at these invoices and amend them. If I take the edit option, then I can see the original invoice, and then it shows me a version of the invoice within our accounts payable automation system. The H is showing me that we've got the header information, and it allows me to go and amend those. This number one shows me it's a one-line invoice, but if it was, say, 4 lines, it would have 1, 2, 3, 4. And if it's highlighted in red, it's telling you that there's an issue to do with that and you've got to fix it before you can go through and approve it. In my case, I'm going to go through and I'm going to enter in the purchase invoice reference number. I can then scroll down and see things like the currency code, the VAT code, any comments that are on there. And if I need to change the currency code or the VAT code, then I could do that. Or I can scroll back up to the top and look at that. I'm going to go to the first line. So I've corrected the header and put that account code. What's wrong with the first line? Well, I can see I've got a description. The item code is Echo. The description is a date of an advert there. It's £90, quantity of 2, so it's £180 plus VAT. I can see that I've got the analysis codes, but I can see the department code isn't correct. So if I select the department code, I can say which department does it belong to. And I'm going to say it belongs to, in this case, it belongs to the marketing department. So I've done that and I'm going to save that away. And now notice it's no longer in red. You've corrected it. So in which case you've gone through and you've added the department and you save that away. You no longer, you fix that particular issue. Okay, that's fine. But I can see the bank details are in red. So if I go to the bank details, it says, right, on the invoice, the sort code is blank, the account number is blank, and it doesn't match with what was on the supplier account. Well, no, it doesn't because they're blank. So in which case I'm perfectly happy with that because I know it's not sending it to the wrong account. But if those were different, that will then be a different scenario. And I go through and I'd have a look at fixing that. OK, so I'm happy with that. I'm now going to submit this through to the workflow because I corrected everything on the invoice and I'm happy that this invoice is OK. I'm now going to submit it to the workflow so that it can get approved. So let me take this submit option. Which workflow? Well, I'm going to send it to the finance workflow. Notice what's happened. We had 5 unprocessed invoices. We've now only got 4 because the submitted have gone up from 2 to 3. The waiting approval has gone up from 2 to 3. And if I go into these different ones, I can see that that invoice that I've just gone through and corrected is now submitted and awaiting approval. So that invoice is sitting there corrected in the approval workflow. I'm not going to select that one. I'm going to select this one here for Technodrive for 1,800 odd quid. OK, here's that invoice. It's similar to what I saw before. However, it's got 4 lines on it. Those lines have all been analysed correctly, so I can see that those are all looking good on there. I can see that the invoice value is £1,864 plus VAT, giving that gross information on there. So I can see this is all looking pretty good. If I go to the actions button, I can add some notes. Is there any notes I want to add to this? So yeah, I'm approving this and I might want to add some notes to share with my colleagues. I can also add attachments. So for instance, this looks like some sort of computer system I bought. Maybe I want to attach the guarantee, or maybe I want to attach the user manual, or whatever else it happens to be. And I can attach that sort of information. I can also select this matching info, because it's telling me there's no purchase order reference, let's say. And I can say, do you want to find a purchase order? Well, I can't because that's not activated yet. So I'm just going to say, I know I'm not going to find a purchase order on the system. So just accept that it's been matched on that. OK, and it just confirms that that's all right. Am I happy with this invoice now? Yeah. I'm going to approve it. So I've just approved that invoice. OK, that's great. If we look at this timeline and documents, here we can see it arrived on this date and time, and Claire in the sales and marketing team approved it at this point. OK, that's fine. What's happened to it now? It's now gone on to the next approver. And the reason it's gone on to the next approver is, remember, when we set the CEO, we said any invoice above £1,000 has to go to the CEO to approve. So what it's done, it sent an email to the CEO to say, you've now got an invoice in your in tray to approve. And it's this invoice because this invoice was 1,800 odd quid. So you can see that it's automatically using the approval to send this up the chain. Notice we've also got a recall option sitting in this bottom corner, and the recall option allows me to say, oh, this invoice is all being coded up wrong. Whoever was used it in the unprocessed tray, they got it all wrong. I can cancel the approval, send it back to the beginning of the workflow, and then somebody else will go through and reapprove it again. But OK, I'm happy with this. So in which case, Claire's approved all of that and I'm happy. So let me go back to the grid. So in which case, Claire's now looking at her list of things. Well, hang on, she's got no more waiting to be approved. Where's that invoice gone? Well, of course, it's no longer waiting for Claire to for Claire to approve. She's already approved it. It's moved somewhere else. If I go to the login, Claire, we know, was in the sales and marketing team, and Rory, we haven't seen Rory, but Rory was in the IT team, and either of those could approve it. But we now know, because it's above £1,000, it's gone up to the CEO, it's gone up to Phil Gates. Let's log in as Phil Gates. So Phil's logged in. Okay, that's fine. Phil has a totally different view of the system itself, because the only thing that Phil does is he manages orders and he manages the invoices, whereas Claire had access to options such as manage suppliers, supervisor configuration, all sorts of different things. It just shows you that it allows different people to do different things within the organisation, and you set it up accordingly. So in this case, Phil has this option to manage invoices. So Phil's going to go in to look at the invoices. Even Phil's workflow is different to Claire's. The only thing that Phil can do is look at the ones that are awaiting approval, look at the ones he's approved, and look at the ones that is denied. He doesn't get involved with going through the workflow like Claire does, so he doesn't go through and add in additional things and analyse them and what have you. That's for Claire to do. All Phil does is look at it and decide whether Phil wants to approve it. Okay, so Phil is here. Phil's going to look at this invoice. Okay, so here we go. We can see all the details for it. There's nothing wrong with that. That looks all correct. Phil can look at the actions button and can look at the notes, can look at any attachments that are on there. Phil can also look at the document timeline. Okay, yeah, it came in there. Claire approved it there. It's now waiting with me, and I can see the original invoice that's on there. So it's now down to Phil to decide what Phil wants to do. Phil could recall it and say, no, you've got the coding wrong. It's nothing to do with the computer department. It's to do with the sales department. So Phil could recall it and send it back to the beginning of the flow, or he could deny it. So in which case, if Phil explicitly denies it, so Phil says, no, I'm not going to approve this. I want to deny this. Can you phone up Technodrive and say they've sent us the wrong computer? I want a credit note. We're not paying this. So I don't want to post it into my purchase ledger. So Phil could explicitly deny it. But in this scenario, Phil's happy with that invoice. So Phil's gone through, has approved that invoice. Once Phil's approved it, he can look at the timeline and say, yeah, it came in there. No, I've approved that. As soon as Phil has approved it, it will post that invoice into the purchase ledger within Opera 3 SE. And Phil can see through the timeline that that's happened. So you can start to see that workflow is designed to be quick. It's designed to be efficient, straight through. Okay, let's have a look at some of the reports. We've got activity-based reports and we've got financial reports. Let's look at some of the activity-based reports. We've got this invoices per day, and this shows you the invoices have been received today, how many were processed today, how many were processed in the last 7 days, and how many have been processed in total. Invoices pending approval. So this will show me how many invoices are pending approval, how many have been sent for approval over the last 7 days, and which ones are in mid-chain yet to be approved. Invoices approved or denied, supplier activity over the last 7 days, and over their total activity. Under the financial reports, supplier spend. If we have a look at this report, what has the supplier spent? So we can select a particular supplier. We can select a period. What do you want it to be? The last 7 days, the last 30 days, the last 3 months. In my case, we've selected the last 3 months, so we can see the value each week over those 3 months coming in from that supplier. And we can see the gross this month, gross over the last 12 months, gross over the all time. If I select the 12 months one, then I can see the details of the invoices in the last 12 months, which are approved, which are still a pending approval. And if I scroll across, I can see the actual values of those invoices. And I can export those out to Excel, or from this screen, I can export them out as a PDF. Okay, that's fine. Let's have a look at one last one. Let's look at the cash requirements. And here's the cash requirements report. I can decide whether I want it to be week or by month. What's the start date? What's the end date? And for this information, I can see that the week beginning the 25th of July, it's 2,000 quid. The week of the 1st of August, it's 1,000. Also, I can see VAT repayments. In the week of the 5th of September, I'm expecting the VAT repayment of £6,000 and what have you. So it shows you this month by month. You can export to Excel. You can export to a PDF. If I drill into a month, so for instance, if I drill into the week of the 5th of September, I can see all the transactions. There we go. On the 5th of September, on the 7th of September, you've got to pay 92 quid to whoever. On the 9th of September, you've got to pay 450 quid to whoever it happens to be. And again, you can export those out to the system. So again, just some standard reports that are on the system itself. Okay, that really concludes what I wanted to go through on the demonstration itself. As you see, we can take an imported purchase invoice from an email. We can code it. We can do that automatically. We can analyze it. We can send it into the approval workflow. And once it's approved, we can post it into the purchase ledger. The whole point is designed to be automatic, simple, and quick. Okay, let's have a look at some of the benefits, but also some of the considerations for this. Eliminate manual processing. The whole point of AP automation is to reduce down the amount of manual processing that you've got. It combines artificial intelligence, machine learning, OCR to extract out the purchase data invoice and utilize it within the system. It will look at the inbound purchase invoice and extract out the header information. So who's the supplier? What's the purchase invoice number? What's the date? What's the netback gross? It will extract out the line data. So what's the product? What's the description? What's the quantity, price, VAT, and all that sort of thing. The whole point is that once the system is fully automized, you will need not do any of that analysis itself. The aim is to have all inbound purchase invoices posted straight into the workflow, send an email to the approver to tell them they need to approve it. And once they approve it, we then immediately post it into the purchase ledger. The time savings can be considerable. When it's done right, it's estimated that AP automation can save up to 78% of the labor time spent in processing invoices, and that's significant. However, I would ask yourselves, how many suppliers do you have? How many of those suppliers do you do repeat business with? And how many are new suppliers? And the reason for that is that the AI software takes about 3 purchase invoices to learn the layout. You know, I said it creates that supplier template. It does, but it takes about 3 purchase invoices to come through for it to get that right. Once it's done that, then it becomes automatic because it knows the details of each invoice from that particular supplier. So if you mainly deal with new suppliers, then the benefits will be reduced. If you mainly deal with existing suppliers, then the benefits can be significant. The next thing I'd also ask is, what format do we receive these invoices in from our suppliers? If the majority of them are sent as a posted printed version, then you only really have 2 options: to either manually scan those invoices yourself and send them to the AP automation system, or phone up your supplier and say, can you send us emails? Can you send the invoices via email, maybe as a PDF? However, our analysis of the UK shows that about 85% of purchase invoices are sent via emails and an attachment in that email, which is the actual invoice, which case AP automation is probably fine for most of our customers. And of course, if you have Opera 3 SQL SC, then these invoices will end up in your purchase ledger as soon as they're approved, and therefore the nominal ledger automatically gets updated. Okay, workflow. Now, every company will have an approval workflow because you're not going to accept any purchase invoice without checking that it's correct. That just makes sense. AP automation is designed to send the purchase invoice directly to an approval workflow, directly from the email that's come through. And if they send it to the workflow, it will send an email out to the approver to tell them, hey, you've got an invoice that needs approving. Now, remember, these approval workflows are configured to your organization. They can be as simple or as complex as you need. They can go down to many levels, or it can be as simple as what is the value of that invoice? However, a purchase invoice will not get lost within the system because it's available. You saw on those grids that we saw, we can see exactly where an invoice is. So the approvers, the managers, the directors, the purchase team know exactly where the invoice are. It's visible to them. And as it moves through the process, that process is updated and everyone can see where it is. So the whole team can see where the invoices are. But again, I would ask ourselves, uh, what is the current invoice management process? Do we know who can approve an invoice and what the rules are? Is it purely based on the value of the invoice, or is it associated with things like who was the department raised the original purchase order? Do individuals approve an invoice, or can it be to a specified group of people? And what I would do is I'd just send a bit of a caution. If you send it out to an individual, what happens is that individual is on holiday, or that individual changes role, or even that individual leaves the company. We suggest that you, instead of sending it to an individual, it might be better to send it to a group of people because that's much easier to manage. Also, with this new tool being implemented, do you need to look at the way you process your approvals and what have you? Do you need to enhance it? Or because you've got a new system in place, can it make it more streamlined and therefore simpler? Reduce costs. As you've seen, improving the way you handle your purchase invoices will not only improve the efficiency of the process, it also has to improve the financial spends and therefore reducing the costs, because people are involved in the process at the point that they need to get involved. They are informed by email to tell them there's an action in their in tray. Once they've done that action, the invoice moves out their in tray and moves up to the next person. And ultimately, once it's approved, it will end up in the purchase ledger. So people are informed when they need to be informed by these nudge emails and what have you. So the cost of handling purchase invoices can be reduced. But I'd always again ask myself a question: does the culture of your company support this approach? For instance, if you're a construction company and your approvers are your quantity surveyors, where do quantity surveyors spend the most of their time? They're probably on the building sites doing what quantity surveyors do. So do you want to include them in the approval process? Maybe you do, because what you can do is you can send a nudge email, but what you can do is you can send it at the end of the day. So when the quantity surveyor gets back into the office, here's a list of all the invoices that you need to approve. So you can include them, but it's probably worth just considering, is that the way you want to go through? I mentioned earlier that if done right, AP automation can save you 75% of the labour time. Okay. In that same survey, it also said that it can save you 66% in the cost savings by putting in a system like the AP automation. And now that is really significant in the sort of cost saving approach. And the other thing is, you thought about the fraudulent invoices. Have you ever received a fraudulent invoice? If so, import the bank account details, match the bank account details to the purchase invoice, and that will allow you to go through and stop those fraudulent invoices going through. Did you know that the cost of fraud to UK businesses is estimated at £1.4 billion a year? And one of the ones that is increasing is this invoice fraud. In a survey that I saw, invoice fraud accounted for 55% of the money lost to organisations between December 21 and February 22. So in that quarter, 55% of the money lost was due to invoice fraud. So that's a concerning statistic. But if you've got systems like this in place, then that can be addressed. Okay, let's chat a little bit about the pricing. Now, remember, AP Automation is only available with Opera 3 SQL Server Edition. So we guess that the first audience that are going to put in AP Automation are going to be Opera 3 customers that might look to move to Opera 3 SQL SE. That's off the back of the whole load of features that we put into SE. However, it's not only those features. Now you have access to a host of new functionality that will dramatically improve the way you handle your purchase invoices. But of course, it's not just to existing customers. If we've got new customers that are looking at Pegasus and they're looking at Opera 3 SQL SE, well, then we've got this sort of functionality for them. Now, what's the price? Well, AP Automation is a SaaS product charged annually to customers over a 3-year term. And you can see the pricing here. Annually, if you've got a 5-user system, then it's 1,997 per year. If you've got a 10-user system, then it's 3,449. A 20-user system is 5,445. and so on. These are named users within the system. Now, the pricing goes up to 400 concurrent users. So if you want to get a quote above this, then talk to the guys at Dean's, and they can give you a quote for that. Now, remember as well, we also have these invoice credits, and they're sold in blocks of 1,000. And each time you process an invoice through the system, it will consume one of those credits. So you need to know what the price is to top up. You can see it there. If you need to add additional users, let's say you go for a 5-user system, but you want to add in additional users, well, then, of course, you can do that. What you need to do is, again, talk to Deans, and they'll tell you about the price to add those additional users. What about if you've got multiple companies? Well, there's no charge for multiple companies. The way the system works is it looks at the number of companies you've got within your Opera system. And indeed, if you've got multiple companies, you might even have multiple systems in your Opera system. Then they can all get imported into the system itself. So there's no charge for doing that. It takes as many companies as you've got within your Opera SE system that's on there. Phase 2. The phase 2 release we will go through and we will implement purchase order integration. This will allow purchase orders to be imported from Opera 3 SE, drop them into the approval workflow so they can be authorized, and then the purchase order can be invoiced through to the supplier. Once the invoice comes back in, then it can match the purchase invoice against the purchase order to ensure that both the quantities and the pricing is correct. Once approved, then it will update the stock, the costing, the fixed assets, the purchase ledger, and so on within Opera SE. Now, I mentioned costing there. However, the costing is automatically updated in the phase 1 release. So you've got a purchase invoice and it relates to a job within costing, then it'll automatically update the costing system as well. So that's covered in the phase 1 release. With this phase 2 release, this will significantly take the functionality of AP automation to a level that most customers with a purchase order would look at implementing. If you go to the Pegasus website, pegasus.co.uk, if you go to the Media Center and go and have a look at this Resource Center, there's a whole host of materials there. But the ones that I would suggest that you should look at, first of all, will be, the Opera 3 SE brochure. This gives you a great overview of the concept behind the product and describes the functionality and things like that. The second one, however, is this reasons to upgrade guide. And the reason for that is that if you want to understand how it's different from its Opera 3 counterpart, then that gives you a concise list of the new features that are added in there. And also we've got this invoice capture and accounts payable automation data sheet. That is a summary of what I've gone through with you this morning. Also, we've recently added in a white paper, which is called Automating Accounts Payable. This white paper identifies 5 steps to make in making a move to greater automation. This gives you 5 steps in making a move to greater automation in accounts payable, and looks at the key things you need to look at when establishing the business case. So if you're the FD, the CFO, and what have you, then that's a great document to look at because it gives you things that you should be aware of. If you log on to the Pegasus website as well, you'll see we have these landing pages, and these landing pages cycle through. I think there's 4 or 5 of them. If you wait until you get this automation one, if you click on that automation one, it will then take you through to another host of information. So what we've got here, we've got this workflow software, which has a teaser video that's on there. There's other teaser videos that are available to you. We have this sort of summary. We have the features we can allow you to see in action. We've got this flow through here. What is the journey that you have when you're implementing accounts payable? We've got the data sheet that I talked of a moment ago. And we also, some of you might have seen these videos that we put out. This is the first video that we put out, and these are a 1-minute sort of teaser video. This was the one that we put out that went through to talk about the implementation of it. And they were quite useful. However, the first one was a teaser to say it was coming down the line. There were a couple of others that showed you the product in action. So it went through and it showed you specific things, a bit like what I've gone through here. But if you go to that Pegasus website, all of those videos are available to you as well. And you'll see other videos coming up fairly soon. Okay. Before we end this session, Let me just ask a couple of questions, and hopefully the answers you find might be quite interesting. Okay, so the first question I'm going to ask myself is, I said it was a SaaS product. Who is the provider of the SaaS environment? Well, it's a cloud-based system hosted on a Microsoft Azure infrastructure. The system is installed in various shards around the globe. For customers in the UK, we're using the EU1 shard, serving the EMA customers running across from the Azure UK South region. And it has a geo-redundant replica maintained in the UK West region. And I guess the important message here is that the customer data remains in the UK. And I know that some customers, they want that assurance their data is not going to leave the UK. No, we're using Azure from 2 data centers based in the UK itself. Is that e-invoicing email address the only way to get invoices into the system? Well, the answer to that question is yeah, they can come from multiple sources, but they must go into that e-invoicing email address. So for instance, if somebody sent me, let's say I was the FD and somebody sent me an invoice direct, well, it can come into my email account, but what I would do is I'd simply forward it onto the e-invoicing account, and then it becomes automated and it will then go through the whole of the system. However, the best idea is to go through and tell all your suppliers, please use this e-invoicing email address whenever you send us an invoice, because you'll get paid quicker because it gets processed quicker. Which invoice document formats are acceptable within AP automation? Now, I think I've answered this several times, but it's worth just going over it again. We will handle PDFs. We will handle Word documents. So if you've got a Word document that's a doc or a docx, we'll handle those. Similarly with Excel, is it an XLS or an XLSX? Is it an HTM or an HTML? Is it a doctext? All of those sort of documents can be handled. And if those documents aren't mentioned, then the system will attempt to use its OCR system to open up and read the data. If it's not readable, then it can't be captured, then it will need to be captured manually. And if we find an email where it can't do that, then when we set the system up, we ask you to give us a designated email account where we'll send those through to, so they don't get lost. In which case, you know, in that email address, these are the ones that we can't handle automatically. And therefore, you've manually got to process those invoices. How long does it take for a purchase invoice to arrive into the system once the email has been received? Now, this is an interesting question. Invoices received directly from known suppliers or via the auto forward will appear in Pegasus AP automation almost instantly. However, if it's a new invoice, then it might take about 24 hours to arrive. And that's typically where the AI is trying to learn what's the format of this invoice. After it's had those 3 invoices, then it becomes instant, but it takes it a bit of a time to go through and learn those sorts of layouts before it becomes immediate. Now, remember, however, once an invoice has been approved, it arrives in the purchase ledger almost instantly as well. Can I scan paper invoices and email them into Pegasus AP automation? Yeah, of course you can. If you get it in a format, someone says you paid a format, you can scan it and then you can email that scanned image into the AP automation system, and then it will fall into the normal workflow as we've seen there. So in which case, yes, you can. But of course, we strongly recommend talk to your suppliers to get them to send you in a, I don't know, a Word format or a PDF or something like that. Because remember, we build up these templates for each supplier, but it takes us time to do that. How frequently is the Opera SE data, reference data, updating the AP application? There's a two-way integration that's going on here. The Opera 3 SQL SE data and the AP automation system sending data back through. But information coming from Opera 3 into the AP system, such as the supplier records, the VAT codes, and what have you, that's invoked automatically on a daily basis overnight. However, if you enter new data into Opera 3 SE and you want it to be available in the AP automation system, then there's a manual sync now option, and that will force an immediate caching of the data, where it takes the data straight out of SE and puts it into the AP automation system. But remember, the invoice data, that's not cached, that's immediately posted across into the system. Okay, I hope I've answered and I hope you found those answers to some of the common questions that we get useful. That is my conclusion